The cold pavement burned her bare feet, yet she kept walking. Every step felt like a quiet battle between hunger and hope, between giving up and surviving one more hour. People passed her without noticing the hollow in her eyes, without hearing the silent prayer beating inside her chest. She was young, beautiful, and completely alone in a world that had already decided she was invisible. And yet, on this ordinary afternoon, destiny was quietly preparing a turn so powerful that the same girl who begged for crumbs would one day stand as the owner of the house where she once cried for mercy. This is not just a story of poverty and pain. It is the story of courage, dignity, and how one fragile heart can rise from the ashes of abandonment and rebuild a life filled with respect and love. Her name was Sarah. She was only 22, but the lines of exhaustion on her face made her look much older. Her skin was pale from days without proper food. Her lips were cracked, her clothes dusty and worn. The sparkle that once lived in her eyes had been dulled by long nights of loneliness and disappointment. Still, beneath that tired body lived a stubborn flame that refused to die. She believed, even when life gave her every reason not to, that something better was waiting. That afternoon, the sun hung heavy in the sky, pressing heat against the narrow street where she walked slowly from door to door. Her stomach twisted in pain, and her head felt light. She had not eaten properly in 3 days. Each house she passed carried the same quiet rejection. Some doors stayed closed, some faces turned away. Some eyes judged her without knowing her story. With trembling hands, she stopped in front of a large concrete house, bigger than most around it. She gathered her remaining strength and whispered a prayer under her breath, hoping for kindness. She knocked gently, then again, her voice shaking as she asked for a little food, just enough to quiet the storm in her stomach. For a moment, there was only silence. The street felt empty, as if the world itself had paused. Disappointment settled heavily on her shoulders, and she turned away, ready to continue her lonely walk. Then a voice called out behind her, asking her to wait. She turned and saw an older man standing at the door. He looked about 55, neatly dressed, his face carrying both kindness and curiosity. There was something thoughtful in his eyes, as if he were searching for a memory hidden somewhere deep inside him. He apologized for the delay, explaining that he had been occupied inside. Sarah repeated her request softly, ashamed of how weak she sounded. The man studied her face carefully, not with judgment, but with recognition. It took a few seconds before realization slowly dawned on him. He remembered her from years ago, connected to a friend from his past, someone who had once filled his home with laughter. The mention of that old name stirred emotions in both of them. Sarah felt a sudden rush of memories, of childhood laughter, of days when life felt light and safe. The man spoke of his wife, how she had once been that same friend Sarah knew, and how life had changed them both in ways neither expected. The warmth in his voice faded into sadness as he admitted that his wife had left long ago, choosing another life, another person, leaving behind a quiet house filled with echoes. Sarah listened silently, her heart tightening. She recognized the familiar pain of abandonment in his words. The two strangers, bound by shared loss, stood facing each other in a quiet understanding that words could barely express. When he asked why she was living like this now, the walls Sarah had built around her heart finally collapsed. Tears flowed freely as years of buried suffering spilled out. She spoke of her marriage that had turned into a prison of cruelty and fear, of nights locked in silence, of dreams shattered by violence. She told him how she had returned to her parents seeking safety, only to receive divorce papers instead of comfort. She spoke of losing her parents soon after, of the loneliness that followed like a shadow that never left. Her voice trembled as she described how even her own brother had treated her like a burden, how humiliation slowly pushed her out of the only place she had left to call home. She wandered from place to place looking for honest work, but everywhere she found only exploitation and bad intentions. Respect became a luxury she could no longer afford. Slowly, painfully, begging became her only way to survive. The man listened without interrupting, his eyes heavy with tears. He could feel the weight of her suffering as if it were his own. Silence fell between them, thick and emotional, broken only by the distant sounds of the street. Finally, he spoke gently, offering a thought that surprised even himself. He told her he could not bear to see her living this way. His house was empty, his life quiet and lonely. He suggested that they could become support for each other, offering companionship and safety in a world that had wounded them both. Sarah felt fear rise inside her. Her heart had been broken too many times to trust easily. She worried about being abandoned again, about becoming a burden, about repeating the same cycle of pain. Yet something in his calm sincerity, his eyes carried honesty, not desire or control, but genuine care. After a long pause filled with inner struggle, she slowly agreed, not because she was desperate, but because for the first time in years, she felt a small spark of safety. He gently took the begging bowl from her hands and set it aside, symbolically closing a painful chapter of her life. Together, they stepped inside the house that had once felt unreachable to her. The home was quiet, dusty, and slightly neglected, yet to Sarah, it felt like a promise waiting to be fulfilled. She immediately began cleaning, moving with renewed energy, as if every sweep of the broom was wiping away pieces of her past suffering. Not long after, the man's younger brother arrived and misunderstood the situation, reacting with anger and suspicion. In his confusion, he treated Sarah harshly, reminding her once again how easily the world judged her. But when the truth was explained, his anger softened into concern. He raised an important reality of society's harsh judgment and suggested that if Sarah were to stay, she should be given dignity through marriage, so no one could question her honor or safety. The idea settled deeply in the man's heart. He realized that dignity mattered more than comfort. That very day, a simple wedding took place in the courtyard, witnessed by a few elders and neighbors. There were no grand decorations, no expensive clothes, only sincere prayers and honest intentions. For Sarah, it felt like a rebirth. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer unwanted. She finally belonged somewhere. Life slowly began to heal them both. The house transformed under Sarah's loving care. Warm meals returned to the table. Laughter filled the silent rooms. Trust grew between them, not built on romance alone, but on respect, patience, and shared healing. Months passed, and happiness quietly deepened when Sarah discovered she was going to be a mother. The arrival of their child brought light into every corner of the home. The man who once carried only memories of loss now held new hope in his arms. Sarah, who once begged for bread, now fed her child with love and dignity. One day, Sarah asked her husband to accompany her somewhere important. She wanted to return to the place where she had once been rejected, not with anger, but with strength. Standing in front of her brother's old home, she felt no fear, only calm confidence. She spoke firmly, not to accuse, but to reclaim her worth. She showed that the woman once treated as a burden had rebuilt her life with honor. The neighbors who had once watched her downfall now saw her transformation. Some felt shame, some felt admiration, but Sarah felt peace. She no longer needed validation from anyone. She had already proven to herself that survival could become success when fueled by courage and self-respect. As she walked away holding her family close, she understood that the real victory was not wealth or status, but inner strength. This story is not only Sarah's, it reflects the hidden struggles of countless people who are judged by their circumstances instead of their character. It reminds us that pain can shape us, but it does not have to define us. No matter how dark the night becomes, there is always a dawn waiting for those who refuse to surrender their dignity. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of your own strength or someone you love, please support this channel by liking the video, sharing it with others, and subscribing for more meaningful stories. Your support helps these messages of hope reach more hearts. Remember, your worth is never decided by where you start, but by the courage with which you rise. Stay strong, stay kind, and never stop believing in your own comeback.